With The Conjuring releasing later this year, I wanted to go and talk about where it all started because this is going to be the last Conjuring movie that really deals around Ed and Lorraine Warren. So let's go back to the beginning of the first Conjuring film, which came out over 10 years ago. And honestly, I think really set a trajectory for horror at that point where we saw that horror can be this blockbuster and it truly has sort of set the tone for what we see now. But that's a whole other video. Let's talk about the case that inspired this first Conjuring film, and it is based on a story of Roger and Carolyn Perron and their family at the Rhode Island farmhouse in the 70s with their 5 daughters. So before we get into it, make sure you hit the subscribe button and notification bell. We've already talked about the real life case for the final Conjuring film, which is the Smurl family case. If you want to go check out that video, it's up already. Go check that out. But we'll also be talking about the second and third film, as well as Annabelle and a ton of other things that center around the Warrens and the Conjuring franchise. So that's all going to be as we get closer to the film. So expect these videos to come out over the summer, but this is the Conjuring 1, the haunting in the Rhode Island farmhouse. So this story revolves around Roger and Carolyn Perron, who move out to the Rhode Island farmhouse in 1971. They are there with their 5 daughters. You have Andrea, Nancy, Christine, Cindy, and April, and you see this in the film as well. It sort of does take that whole story and brings it forward. Now, everything that happened actually here happened over a longer period than what you saw in the film. It actually was that the Perrons lived here until 1980. I'm reading an article and it talks about how Andrea actually wrote a book in 2011 called House of Darkness, House of Light, which actually helped to inspire the film. She said to Global News in 2021, "We all experience encounters with spirits. Some were unpleasant, some were lovely, cordial and communicative. From benign to benevolent to oblivious to mean-spirited, the spirits were just like us, a wide variety of personalities." So according to Carolyn and her daughters, they actually saw full-body apparitions in the home. They would hear noises, they smelled rotten odors, and ultimately a seance was performed by Ed and Lorraine Warren, which is something that obviously we see in the movie. It is the big climatic finale in the movie where we see them perform the seance, and honestly, it's still one of my favorite scenes in a horror movie of the past decade. I think it was well shot, well done, and honestly truly terrifying, especially when the blanket goes over the mother. So we'll talk more about that in a bit. But apparently we heard that the Warrens contacted the Perrons after hearing about the situation, and other paranormal researchers also offered to come and investigate. Lorraine said in a Conjuring featurette about the home, she said, "I knew the house was haunted. All I had to do was walk in it." So the Warrens were allegedly trying to get the Perrons' parents to communicate with whatever was the entity through a seance, and this was apparently targeting Carolyn and the daughters a lot more. So Andrea talked to US Today in 2013 and says that she actually witnessed this alleged seance that happened. She goes on to say, "My mother began to speak a language not of this world in a voice not her own. A chair levitated and she was thrown across the room." So the Perrons would eventually move out in 1980 after all of this. So almost a decade of haunting and they were done. So in 2021, Andrea actually talked to the Providence Journal and said that this is what exactly led up to that moment. "My mother told my father she would not survive another winter in the house. She had been under attack in that house for 10 years. So that pretty much was what led them up to pretty much saying like, yeah, we're out of here. So a big thing about the Conjuring film here is that we clearly have a villain, and that villain here is Bathsheba Sherman, who is said to be a murderer, a witch, and apparently was also wrongfully accused. So there's a lot of sort of turmoil going on because she is very much so a resentful spirit, is what the Conjuring films try to convey. But according to historians and even Andrea, one of the daughters, she says that the history of Bathsheba probably didn't get it all right. She goes on to say, essentially, Bathsheba copped the blame for everything evil, and it simply wasn't the case. This is Andrea talking to the Global News, and she also now believes that the evil spirit was likely somebody else, not Bathsheba, who has been sort of portrayed as the main culprit to the hauntings and everything evil going on, and the same thing that happened in the Conjuring movie. So the family had apparently also looked into what exactly was the history of this farmhouse, and Andrea says, "These are spirits who had an attachment to the property. 8 generations of one extended family had lived and died at the farm, and some of them had never left. My mother did historical research and found virtually every entity we were able to name had, as life beings, either died by their own hand or died so traumatic a death and so sudden a death that they didn't seem to know that they were dead." And so the Warrens' involvement in this is a bit different too than the Conjuring film, because according to the investigation, as I'm reading this Entertainment Weekly article, it says the Warrens' investigation of the Harrisville case came to an end when Roger Perron ordered them to get the hell out of the house after a dramatic seance in which Carolyn began to speak a strange language and levitated out of a chair. Andrea Perron goes on to say, "The only time I was ever truly frightened was during the seance. There are no words to adequately express the event." So yeah, that's pretty much everything we know about that case right there. It does go more into depth. The daughter, Andrea, has written a book, and there's also more interviews with her if you want to go check that out. So it seems like a lot of the things that the movie, and I mean, this is with anything, right? They do always like make it a bit more far out, right, than what the true case is. Because I really didn't know about the whole thing with the father kicking out the Warrens at a point because of the seance, which is a very crucial moment in the film, is the seance. This is the moment, break it or make it, right? If the family is going to get over this haunting that's happening. Also the fact that Bathsheba is named as the main villain and the main evil entity, I thought that was interesting in the film. But I see that a lot of the historians now, and also the daughter of the couple, now say, I don't think it really was Bathsheba that was doing this to us. Maybe it was another spirit. And Bathsheba is also a entity, a person that has a lot of debate about what exactly happened to them and who exactly they were as well. So this whole thing, like I say, it's always a bit murkier when you start looking deeper into it, but that is basically the basis of the first Conjuring film, is the Perrons family haunting in the Rhode Island farmhouse that was done to the couple and their 5 daughters, which eventually led to them just leaving the house because they couldn't take it anymore. The Warrens came into it to try and see what was going on, and like I said before, the Warrens are seen as either they are truly paranormal investigators that are tapped into the spirit world. Some people don't see it that way and see them more as sort of like taking advantage of people. So it's up to you to decide what you want to believe about that or not, but I'm just here to report to you that this case of the Perron family was what inspired the first Conjuring film, and there's some interesting stuff there that I want to talk about, but we'll talk about the next haunting in the next video. Probably will come out maybe in 2 weeks or so stay tuned for that. And yeah, very excited to talk more about this. We could definitely talk more about the haunting if you want in depth. I could definitely look into the Bathsheba story and see what it comes up with if you want to talk more about that, but I don't want to just go ahead and dive deep into the paranormal stuff if that's not exactly what y'all come here for the channel, because we just talk horror and movies. But I thought it was a little bit more of an appendix of sorts, right, to sort of add this on. But we'll see. We could make this into a series. But let me know what you think about the Perron family haunting, the true story of the first Conjuring film, and let me know if you're excited for the Conjuring Last Rites. I already have a video talking about it, as well as the real life case if you want to go check that out. And as always, that's going to do it for me. We're on the road to 50,000 subscribers, less than 10,000 and go from that. So we got a pretty good amount to go. Let's hit that before the summer. I'll see all of you next time. Stay safe, stay positive.